Have you ever felt like you just needed to make an adjustment or a change in your life? I feel like at this point, I have a lot that I want to improve. I know that there's things about me that need to get better. I need to be more patient. I need to be able to really commit to certain things in my life that have always been challenging. And I need to have a more overall positive attitude whenever I'm doing things that are really difficult, like in the middle of a really hard workout, or when I'm having a challenging time in my relationship with my husband. I'm going to be curving this podcast just a little bit to kind of meet my own selfish needs. From this point forward, I'm going to be bringing guests onto the show, people with whom I both admire and who I think I could learn from. So I hope that you are all ready to hear some interesting interviews with some people in my life who I find fascinating, and I hope to just help me on this journey to become a better person. You are listening to Podcast Handstand, and I am your host, JR Jakeway. If you've ever had anybody in your life who just instantly made you feel at home or comfortable, maybe it's somebody that was an authority figure, or maybe you were in a social setting and you just needed that one person to make you feel like you were welcome. Well, my guest today made me feel exactly that way the first time that I met her. I just moved to Los Angeles and I was trying out a CrossFit gym, and I walked into the 12:30 class, and this person was the first person who welcomed me in. Everybody else welcomed me as well, but I will always remember that friendly face. Sometimes you just need someone to make you feel like you're part of the group. So help me welcome the wonderful Anna Stern.
Oh, that was so sweet, JR.
It's so true.
I love that you remember that. It's incredible.
I do. I actually think about that often because anytime a new person comes in the gym, this could be a very stressful situation for folks because if they don't know anybody there, maybe they've moved into a new city and they're just trying out something that feels different. Maybe they haven't been working out for a long time. To have a friendly face, someone who's going to make them feel at ease is always heartwarming and welcoming. And you were that person for me. So thank you. If I've never told you, thank you.
No, that's so great. Wow. That made me really happy.
Well, we're here today because I want people who are in my life who not only inspire me, but people whom I feel like I could learn something from. So you are here today. You, I feel like, have a lot of things that we can talk about. You have a great story. And so before we get started, let's talk about where you are in life right now. Tell our listeners what you're doing with your life right now.
Yeah, sure. So I am currently a coach on staff at Strange Strength and Conditioning in North Hollywood. And I am a personal trainer and run an adaptive fitness program through Angel City Sports. And I am just generally a functional fitness coach and strength and conditioning coach.
And you also are going to the Adaptive CrossFit
Oh,
Games. Congratulations. I just saw the
thank
post.
you.
How
Yeah,
do you feel?
feeling good. Just officially got the invitations, I think yesterday. So I was like, well, I better immediately register. But it feels good. It feels really good. It's a long season, starting from February in the Open all the way through. Our games aren't until the third weekend of September. So it's a long season to stay, fit for. But I'm really looking forward to it.
What's a huge accomplishment? This is the first time that you've gone to the games?
Yeah, so I have gone to the wheel wad games for the last 3 years in a row. Wheel wad, I like to explain to people, wheel wad is to the CrossFit games as the Paralympics are to the Olympics, in the sense that for the last 11 years, Wheel Wad Games have run its own games event when adaptive athletes did not have a place at the CrossFit Games. And so Wheel Wad is just an amazing organization that has really given all of us athletes with different disabilities the platform to compete on a world stage. And I have had the extreme good fortune to podium for the last 3 years in a row there. And
Yeah.
this year with the CrossFit Games expanding into separate events for masters, teens, and adaptives, the team running the CrossFit Games for the adaptives is Wheel WOD. So
Oh,
now instead
great.
of having two separate events, now it's just combined into one event. So it's it's my first time being under the CrossFit Games banner, but
Okay.
still same friends, same place.
Well, I have no doubt that you're going to do extremely well, and we will be cheering you on, but congratulations. That's a huge accomplishment.
Thank
Would
you. I
you
appreciate
mind
it.
explaining to our listeners what the word adaptive actually means?
Yeah, sure. So, an adaptive athlete, when we look at kind of trying to define the term, would really be referring to a person who has a permanent disability, whether that's a physical disability or some developmental disabilities, which impacts their ability to perform different movement patterns, different everything. So our ability to walk into a CrossFit gym as an able-bodied person would be the difference between experience and not yet having experience. But there are barriers to entry for people with disabilities. So we have access issues in the accessibility of learning new sports and gaining access to sports and the ability to just use those as outlets for, our daily stresses and
Sure.
staying fit. And also on a competitive level, we have barriers to entry. I can't just show up at the park and play pickup basketball with able-bodied folks. So we have adaptive sports, and adaptive athletes get to compete in those. So they are really just about providing a space for people with different disabilities to be able to participate in athletics of whatever form.
And then what are the different categories of the adaptive games that you'll be attending?
Yeah, so the CrossFit Games this year and Wheel WOD for the last several years has actually 15 different divisions
Wow.
within it. So there'll be top 10 athletes in the world from each division, men, and then 10 women from each division competing at the games this year. So it ranges drastically. One of the main things people need to understand about if they've never learned anything about Paralympic sports or adaptive sports in general is that the spectrum of disability is vast. No
Sure.
two people with the same diagnosis will ever have the same experience or the same limitations. So when we look at creating a competitive platform for sports within adaptive athletics, it's really about categorization of these athletes called classifications, which
Okay.
evaluates the type and severity of impairments and then puts you in a classification that allows you to compete against people with similar levels of impairment. So a person with an amputation above the elbow has significantly different impairment level than a person with a amputation below the elbow,
Sure.
or a person with an amputation above the knee has different experience and different abilities compared to someone who has an amputation below the knee. So within the sport of CrossFit, we have sub classifications that separate out people so they're only competing against people with similar impairment levels. So
Gotcha.
within the CrossFit Games, there are classifications for athletes with upper limb impairments, lower limb impairments, athletes who compete in a seated position, so people who use a wheelchair.
Sure.
And then there's people with neurological disabilities like myself, and intellectual impairment, as well as visual impairment. So there's 15 different categories
Okay.
total competing, and each of those ones I just listed has subdivisions within them.
Gotcha. Okay. And so if you're looking at a very general, basic barrier of entry to most CrossFits, what's one thing that you see most often if you're visiting a CrossFit that you could see that would be a huge barrier for the adaptive community?
That's a great question, and we can break it down to like literally the most basic things, like
Yeah.
getting in the door.
Right.
Are there stairs to enter the space? are there accessible bathrooms? Is it wide enough for someone in a wheelchair to go in and be able to turn around, get off the wheelchair onto
Yeah.
the toilet? The most simple, basic things. Are there accessible parking spots in your
Mm,
parking lot? But then also, once you get inside the room, is the room organized in a way that people who using a wheelchair or using crutches or anything like that would have the ability to move around the space and use the
sure.
space? And that's just at its most basic level of accessibility, things that we as people with disabilities run into in any public setting. When it comes to more specifically within a CrossFit affiliate or gym, setting things like how the barbells and plates are stored changes your ability to independently get those pieces of equipment out and use them.
Sure.
Where the bikes and the ski ergs and the rowers are laid out within the room changes your ability to independently get those pieces of equipment out. And so when it comes to just setting up your station, pulling up in your car, getting out of your car, getting
Mm,
into the room, and setting up before the workout even starts, there's a myriad of ways to be limited by the lack of access. And it's just not necessarily something that gym owners or coaches think about.
sure.
But statistically speaking, the disability community is a huge portion of our society that
Right.
should be able to access fitness just as anyone else can. And so it's really not a question of if an adaptive athlete will come to your gym. It's more of a question of when. And so being prepared in that way for an adaptive athlete to show up at your door and say, I want to take a class, just those basic things makes their experience honestly possible in the first place.
Sure. And then as you're describing those things to me, I'm already seeing barriers that we have at some of the gyms that I'm at right now. Like, even I'm assuming that if the plates are stacked on top, up and down, that's going to be
Yes.
challenging versus if you have an attachment on the side of the rig where you could just pull them off. Something like that I
Yes.
would never have even thought of, but we don't have any of that at the three gyms that I'm currently coaching at. So that is right there, like such a simple thing that we would never think of unless we had an athlete that we were working with that was challenged with that.
Yes, it's really not something that the general population of able-bodied people think about. The basic accessibility of the equipment and the space as a whole is a deterrent to someone who wants to get fit. If they roll into a space and they can't even set up their station independently, the chances of them coming back are much smaller.
Sure.
So, we want to always be welcoming and have people in their very first kind of vulnerable moment. Like you said, coming into the gym for the first time can be anxiety inducing if you know
Sure.
no one, especially if maybe this is a new sport that you're trying and you've done, your workouts on your own in an LA Fitness, but you've never been in a group setting. You've never done certain barbell movements. It's all quite intimidating for people joining for the first time. And now imagine on top of that, you had to ask people you'd never met before to help you
Yes.
get out every piece of equipment you're going to need.
Man, that is a great piece of information. Thank you for sharing that. I got some changes to make now.
We
Okay.
all do. I mean, it's part of the process.
It's a growing process, right? All right, so now that we have a good sense of where you are presently, let's back up a little bit to the events of what has brought us here. So let's start from the beginning. Why don't you give us a sense of what a young Anna was like?
Young Anna was always really athletic. Sports were in my blood from the time I was a very small child, and it's I'm thankful that I was able to get into many sports as a elementary schooler, preschooler. My parents were able to really make sure that I had access to the opportunity to try a lot of different sports. I played, competitive soccer and basketball before I was even, halfway through elementary school.
Okay.
And it's something that I always really enjoyed and was super motivated by and had an interest in being the best I could be at it. As I, athletically look back on my life, I think I geared a lot more towards soccer as I got older and made that my primary focus and my primary sport. I was a goalkeeper through college. I played NCAA soccer in college. I was a goalkeeper for our team. But yeah, as a kid, sports was just always something I was very drawn to, whether it's watching on TV or playing myself or learning the new rules to a new sport I've never seen before.
Sure. And then at some point you became ill when you were a child, correct?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer when I was 8 years old. I did not know what cancer was, and I did not know what ovaries were,
Okay.
but I learned very quickly.
Yes.
And so, yeah, my cancer diagnosis and my treatments really dominated a large portion of several years of my life. And I grew up in a small town, so it's like, you're the cancer kid. Everybody knows who you are. They all know my parents for the last, 30 years. And
Sure.
so it was a very interesting experience, like growing up as someone with a really significant difference. Yeah, so I was diagnosed with cancer when I was 8. And, I like to joke that, all of my life problems have come from the 2 C's, cancer and calculus. But now that I'm not using my engineering degree anymore, calculus isn't a problem. So really, cancer spurred on a lot of what it is that my daily experience is today. We'd like to think that after cancer,
Hmm.
you go back to normal, but that is really just never the case. Whether you're diagnosed as a pediatric patient like I was, or someone as a young adult, or even as a fully fledged adult who knows already who they are and what they're
Sure.
passionate about in life and has this really, solidified community, all walks of life. Once you experience cancer, there's no going back.
How
And
could you be the
so
same person though
you
after that?
couldn't. It's so true. And, really, we have hard expectations for ourselves that we should be whoever we think we should be after. Just because treatment is over does not mean that the cancer experience is over. It stays with you for forever. And especially as we're now learning in a more modern medical system, pediatric cancer survivors have a much higher survival rate at this point in the history of medical experience.
Yes.
And so, kids diagnosed with these cancers are surviving into adulthood, and our life expectancies are extending. And with that comes the long-term side effects of our cancers itself, as well as the
Yes.
treatments for those cancers. So like I have had 6 abdominal surgeries in my life. So I have tons of nerve damage and scar tissue buildup. And so just the movement of daily life is something that, has changed drastically throughout my life. I was
Sure.
having surgeries every few years, really, like through into my young adulthood. And it's just one of those things that there really is no after, and it kind of just ebbs and flows and continues, and you grow with it.
Hmm.
So in a way, it's an interesting thing because we think that it should end. Okay, I'm not in
Yeah.
treatment, therefore I'm normal. But my life experience will have changed forever, no matter if you are in treatment for 2 months or 2 years. But it definitely, really is the kind of catalyst, I think, originally into this path in my life.
Sure. Do you remember the moment that your parents either told you or you came to a realization that you had cancer?
I have a very distinct memory of the like main kind of pinnacle moment where we knew something was wrong. I had just very extreme abdominal pain, and I was a very independent kid, and
Sure.
I don't think I really told anybody that I was having these pains, for likely several months,
Okay.
hindsight 2020. But when it was a day we went to the farmer's market in my hometown, a very normal Sunday experience. And literally this pain came back to the point that I was on the ground and I could not take another step forward.
Wow.
And my parents were like, something is wrong here. And they took me to my pediatrician who, I said small town, I was in school with his 3 daughters at the
Hmm.
time. And he took one feel around my belly and was like, relax your muscles. And I was like, I'm relaxed. And he immediately sent us next door to the local hospital.
He knew.
He knew the tumor itself was 10% of my total body weight at the time that it was found.
Man.
So it really took up basically my entire abdominal cavity
Yeah.
at that point. And so he knew right away that something was very wrong. And, it was really quite a quick transition to realizing, okay, something's not right, to, oh, this is really not right. And I ended up being treated at a hospital that is like over an hour drive away from my hometown,
Okay.
in one of the larger cities in the area. And so, suddenly I was, basically living at a hospital quite far away from my home and the life I'd known. And it happened all what felt kind of like overnight in a way.
Sure. Can I ask where you're from?
Yeah, sure. So I'm from like the Ithaca area of New York
Okay.
State. So it's like central New York,
Sure.
the Finger Lakes region, right in the middle of the state. And I was treated at Syracuse University Hospital at Upstate Cancer Center. So about an hour north of where I grew
Okay.
up.
And then how long were you treated before you were in remission?
I was in treatment for several months with several rounds of chemotherapy. We had to change the drugs I was on partway through, and then went into remission, and then ended up having another surgery about a year later. And it gets rather complicated when you
Okay.
look at, kind of a continuing illness and kind of complications rather as well. But
Sure.
yeah, so I was in treatment for several months of my fourth grade year of school.
Okay. So you went through the treatment, you overcame, and then as you got to college age, you were NCAA athlete, correct?
Yeah, I was. I played soccer. Came in, recruited my freshman year. I came, early because I played soccer. It's a fall sport. So we were the fall athletes are the first ones on campus.
Yeah.
So, we're on this big empty campus, and the only people on the whole campus are the fall athletes. And yeah, I played that freshman year. The program was in a really interesting transitional period of its life. It had a very long tenured coach. But the school was looking to make some changes and make the team and its athletics more competitive. And so they had brought in a new coach. And I was in her very first recruiting class. I think she brought in like 10 of us. And so it was like this big overhaul of the program and what she wanted it to be. And, they're very doing great. She's still a coach now. They're just, succeeding like nobody's business. And it's great to see. But, I played that year, and I realized it really wasn't for me at that time. The program just wasn't really what I wanted to be a part of. And it, really wasn't fulfilling in the way that I was enjoying getting up in the morning to go to practices, So I made some changes. Yeah.
Do you recall what you were looking for exactly?
Honestly, no. A place that made me feel like I belonged, and a place that made me feel welcome. And it was a very divided team. People who were the upperclassmen who were brought in and played for that original coach, and then our freshman class who was this newcomers who are taking the spots, and with this new coach who was asking new things of these older athletes. And I was in a very challenging period of my life, and it just wasn't really the right place for me. And so I ended up moving away from NCAA sports, and I played for the rugby team for the rest of my years at school, and raced mountain bikes on the cycling team as well. And it was a lot of fun. And I am, if I had found rugby earlier in life, maybe I would have played a little less soccer, but it was fun to find even a little later.
So after your college years, you did have another health issue following, correct?
Yeah. So, it's kind of leads into where I'm at right now in my life. I am, a disabled athlete, but I'm also a disabled person. I live my life with a permanent disability every day. And I was diagnosed with a neurological movement disorder, in my early adulthood. I again, in hindsight, can remember symptoms that I really didn't put two and two together for as
Okay.
early as college. But it wasn't until I, was out here in California and I was living here and playing, really competitive high level rugby that I was realizing that things weren't really adding up.
Sure.
My ability to keep up with the people around me was declining in very strange ways. And, my general coordination was having issues. I was having a lot of problems with just like my movements really not being fluid and coordinated in the way that they had always been for my whole life. Being coordinated was not something I had to think about.
Sure. Was this sporadic?
My
Like it would
entire
just happen every once in a while? That it'd be like,
Yeah, yeah, originally it kind of felt like that, it's like, "Oh, that's weird. I probably have
sure.
a cramp. I'll eat a
Yeah,
banana."
yeah.
And you just find ways to push it to the side and say, "That's not, whatever. It's fine. It'll go
Yeah.
away." And it wasn't until, really in, my young adulthood that I started to realize I was like, maybe these things are related. And, at the end of the day, we can't necessarily perfectly pinpoint the source
Okay.
of my impairment. It's really the longer I have a neurologist in my life, the more I realize we know very little about the human brain.
Sure.
But yeah, I was diagnosed with a neurological movement disorder called dystonia. Dys as in dysfunction, tonia in reference to the tone of muscles.
Okay.
So it's a neuromuscular disorder that basically causes hypertonicity in the muscles that are affected. So basically I have continual contraction of muscles, and like more like another neurological movement disorder. If someone's like, I don't know what that even means, the most popularly known in today's society would likely be Parkinson's disease. So that's in the
Okay.
same category of illness. And I have those kind of continual contractions of muscles, but also tremor type symptoms like you would see in a Parkinson's
Okay.
patient as well. And basically, it has continued to steadily progress over
Okay.
many years now. And it's like hard to say exactly, what its cause was, but the speculation amongst the neurology teams that I have seen is that it is very likely connected as a long-term issue from my cancer or its
Okay.
treatments or a combination thereof. I've had many long-term effects that have been followed for many years by my medical teams. And so it's likely related, but no one can say 100% for sure, mostly because not enough research has been done into the disability and the, understanding of it to really pinpoint.
And then there are times when it feels like it's not as bad as other days. Like you have flare-ups, or you go through,
Yeah.
waves of it being better, worse.
Yeah, totally. There's a baseline of
Okay.
my general existence. And in that baseline, I have, pretty much continual muscle contraction in my hand.
Okay.
So like these fingers don't extend fully. I can't open them. I
Okay.
can kind of like push them,
Sure.
but I can't open the hand fully. My foot, basically, instead of being in neutral,
Okay.
points down and turns in. So I wear an ankle foot orthotic called an AFO that it basically is a piece of carbon fiber that holds my foot in neutral.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, if I were to walk barefoot, like if I'm in my own home, think about it as like my pinky toe would be the first thing to touch the ground. I
Gotcha. Okay.
cannot flatten my foot.
Okay.
And so those exist as the baseline all the time. But there are absolutely flare ups where things are significantly worse, to the point that, I have to call out of work. I can't
hmm
drive. I can't, get up, make my own lunch, and those kind of muscle spasms that can get significantly worse, as well as, kind of more intensity within those prolonged muscle contractions as well.
Are there stressors that precede these flare-ups?
Yeah, it's hard to define entirely, like really pinpoint, but pretty much all neurological impairments worsen with fatigue. So whether that is a general fatigue, if I haven't been sleeping well, or if I, have missed medication dosages, or if I have a really hard workout and I haven't recovered all that well, all of those things, and also though all of those things combined can
Yeah.
lead to flare-ups. It's a little hard to pinpoint exactly when I will have a flare-up. I can't
Okay.
often tell ahead of time, but there are certainly times when I'm like, oh, I'm beat. Like this is going to be a rough, couple of days.
Sure. So
But
this must be really challenging as you are then trying to peak at just the right time for something like the CrossFit Games. So how do you and your coaches work together to create a plan that doesn't derail you for days?
Yeah, and that is a great question, and honestly, so much of it has come with time and experience. Several years ago, I would say that I overdid it way too much and suffered because of it.
Sure.
And it comes to a point where you start to recognize, like, okay, these movement patterns challenge these muscles in this way. So like one of my main problem areas is the musculature of my hip flexors.
Okay.
On my right side. My dystonia only impacts the muscles on the right side of my body, which is a bit of a more rare presentation. But so I know that I will have a flare up of spasms in my hips if I have movements like sit-ups. If I do high volume sit-ups, I will, without a doubt, have a flare-up of the symptoms within my hip. If you look at like the most basic way of thinking about what is dystonia, at the end of the day, it comes down to it is an overactivation of signals from the brain being sent to muscles telling them to activate when I don't
Okay.
want them to. So
Gotcha.
it's basically like a continual sending of signals and, over electrical activity within my brain,
Do the medication
telling
help
those
limit
muscles to.
those signals?
Yes, exactly. So I'm on a couple of different medications that basically, if you think about it, are a little bit like kind of depressants in a way,
Okay.
because they really broadly
Yeah.
reduce the amount of electrical activity within the brain. So like some of them double as like anti-seizure type
Okay.
medications, and stuff like that, that really there's none that pinpoint motor function activity from the brain, and they only broadly, blanketly reduce all electrical activity in the brain. And so as I was changing medications or changing dosages of medications, there was, weeks, months of having a really intense fatigue and this, I felt like I was kind of living, my brain felt like it was living inside of a fog
Yeah.
continually as medication dosages change, because you have to build up a tolerance to, and you're building up
Sure.
to a steady dosage. And so in moments of consistency, like my medications haven't changed in a long, probably a year or something now, I am able to be at much more of a steady level of understanding of, what I think I'll be able to do on any given day. But there's a lot of listening to my body, and a lot of, days that I didn't plan to be rest days, but they turned into rest days,
Sure.
because one of the really only ways to, improve brain function is to just sleep. And so it's been a big learning curve. It's been a lot of trial and error to find out, kind of where my limits are for how can I push hard without overdoing it to the point that then I have, 3 steps forward, 5
Sure.
steps back.
Well, then on a multi day competition like the CrossFit Games, then does that become a little bit of a stressful situation based on what workout's going to come on what day and how that could affect you, or if even you're going to be able to finish the competition?
Absolutely. That's a continual thing that we think about.
Wow.
At this point, I've done many multi-day events. At the Wheelwad Games over the last few years, we averaged about like 11 or 12 events across
Wow.
3 or 4 days. And a neurologically impaired athlete like myself and the people I compete against in my division, we are going to feel the effects of those workouts in a really different way than someone
Sure.
who's a seated athlete or a blind athlete or an amputee. We just experience them in a different way. So in a way, we will get muscularly sore just like everyone else, but we will also have this neurological fatigue factor. And a lot of it comes down to how we recover. So, I wear earplugs at
Okay.
all of my competitions because the additional stimulus of just the noise
Sure.
factor, because we all know that CrossFit events have bumping music and crowds
Yeah.
are yelling. And, as much as I love to socialize and hang out with my friends and spend that time with them, I have to make the decision to kind of isolate myself in a
Sure.
way so that I'm able to let my brain settle and let my brain recover, because even able-bodied people can become overstimulated by environments like that. But when
Me.
your brain is already, yeah, exactly. Even a regular average human being will become
Yeah.
overstimulated in situations like that. And then imagine you just did the most neurologically fatiguing workout you could possibly imagine. We all had those moments where we are like CNS fatigued after a workout, and
Yes.
you lay there on the floor and you're like, I can't even form a full thought.
Yeah.
That's pretty much how I feel for 4 or 5 days straight at these events, but then also for like a solid week or two after. So at some point, I have to make the decision for myself about, is this competition way of doing this sport worth my while?
Sure.
Is this worth it? And so, maybe this is my last year competing in this way, but
Okay.
a lot of it comes down to how you recover in between, and how am I sleeping? How am I
Sure.
eating?
And I'm sure they're
Those things
continuing.
have, yeah.
Are they continuing to find new ways for you to recover, or have you found over the years that you've been competing that there are new inventions or things that have helped you recover faster? Or is it really
I'm
just
not sure.
rest?
Yeah, I'm not really sure that that's happened for neurological athletes.
Okay.
I think for most of us, it's really about rest. It is about rest and recovery in a kind of a different way. Like, we will all use the boots and that circulate ice water
Sure.
and give you a massage at the same time. But at the end of the day, when we look at like CNS fatigue, that central nervous system fatigue, the only real way to allow it to calm down is to remove yourself from an environment and be within a space that you're able to mentally rest. And so there's quite a balancing act that goes along with competing in the sport of CrossFit when you have a neurological disability.
Sure. So, besides being this amazing athlete that you are, you're also a coach, as you mentioned earlier. You coach functional fitness classes, and you're also volunteering for an organization called Angel City Sports, which is you're coaching other adaptive athletes. So, tell me how this relationship began.
I really became passionate about coaching other people with disabilities once I recognized how much doing CrossFit had really changed my life. As I was, especially as a person who develops a disability later in life,
Sure.
Our perception of ourselves drastically changes. The way we see the world drastically changes. And I really was so lucky to find an environment where I was able to go in and absolutely have no idea what I was doing, but work through it and figure it out and, move forward in a way that left me feeling very accomplished, very proud, being able to exist in a healthier way in the world. So much of functional fitness is about what we do in the gym
Mm-hmm.
and how does that relate to our ability to succeed out in the world?
Sure.
And there is, in my opinion, no more applicable group to experience that than people with disabilities. If you think about at the end of the day, what is a deadlift? It's picking up an object off the floor
Sure.
and just picking it up and getting back up to vertical. At the end of the day, people with disabilities have a difficulty doing that in every scenario.
Sure.
So being able to train that movement pattern in the gym in a controlled environment where we have the ability to train it under supervision and then increase the weight that we're using, increase the intensity that we're doing it with, that becomes so directly applicable to your daily experience. Strength training allows some of my personal training athletes to independently break down their own wheelchair, put the whole thing in their car, and then go somewhere on their own. They don't need someone else to help them build and break down their chair, because
True
now they
empowerment.
have it. It's exactly, it leads to an independent life outside of the gym.
And then what advice do you have for parents who have children who would be considered adaptive, or are many times reluctant to enroll their child in a sport, period, let alone gymnastics? So what would you say to those parents if they are having that fear of introducing their child to sport? And if at the point that the parents are deciding they want to, what advice can you give them about finding something to do?
Yeah, so, it wasn't until I started to find other adaptive athletes that I realized that it was something that I could do. And so finding the community of Wheel Wad on Instagram was actually my first exposure to adaptive functional fitness.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, whoa, they can do it. Maybe I can do it. Then from there, it's really all about that representation, showing you what's possible, and then you being interested in trying. If a child in particular who, whether they acquired their disability at a young age or it's a congenital impairment that they were born with, have so much less access to a lot of the developmental areas that regular, average, able-bodied kids just fall into. You can't just enroll your kid in, peewee baseball
Sure.
or soccer at age 3 in the way that you can if your child is able-bodied. So looking for organizations in your area that support and run adaptive athletics programs is the number one way to find ways to integrate your child into sports, to see if it's something that long-term they're interested in. And, that's how I found a lot of what I do now. So I stumbled upon the Angel City Sports Organization here within LA. They're a nonprofit that supports free access to adaptive sports. And I saw one of their events online and I was like, oh, I guess I better try this. And, now I play competitively on their women's wheelchair basketball team.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so this was my first full year playing with them. We came in 5th at nationals. Not that I'm bragging, but it was very cool. And so Angel City, along with so many other local organizations in different cities, provides much of the equipment access. So, a sport specific wheelchair can cost thousands of dollars.
Sure.
But organizations like Angel City provide those wheelchairs.
Oh, great. Okay.
They have, wheelchairs that are, the sizes for adults, sizes for children, and they have all free events throughout the year. And that is how I started to meet other people with disabilities who were interested in sports. And that's how you make so many incredible new friends, and how people start to realize that there's more out there that they have access to than they realize. And it was really through just connections that I made playing wheelchair basketball that I found kind of the first few people who were interested in doing personal training and learning about CrossFit. And, I still coach all of them, a couple of years later now. And it's really about seeing kind of how that sport has changed the way they play their other sports and the way that they live their lives. To have seated athletes who tell you that, now they are strong enough to sit up, hold themselves up while holding the steering wheel. So they're able
Yeah.
to get their driver's license when they had never been able to do that for years prior, and so it's access to so much that it opens every door you could ever even have imagined and more. And so it was, at the end of last calendar year that Angel City asked if I would be interested in coaching a free adaptive fitness class.
Yes.
So, those different sports are offered at different intervals, every week, every other week, every
Okay.
month, a couple times a year, everything from adaptive golf to adaptive swimming to wheelchair basketball, wheelchair tennis, tons of sports. And so they want to expand what sports are available to people. And because of that, they asked if I would be interested in starting a program. And I, of course, said yes. And now we host once a month a group of adaptive athletes at Strange Strength, and spend an hour and a half together on a Sunday morning looking to just do hard things. That's
Yeah.
really all it is. It's getting out of your comfort zone, learning new things and conquering them, and, leaving feeling accomplished and feeling strong and feeling powerful. And they keep coming back, so they must enjoy it. But it's been such an amazing opportunity because it just feels like you never know what's out there. And the more people see it and the more people experience it and then tell
Hmm.
their friends and share it on Instagram,
Sure.
the more people will realize that this service exists, that there are coaches who know what the disability experience is like,
Right.
have the knowledge and education to then build programming that will benefit them in ways that they didn't necessarily know they needed in life, and then be able to teach them all that they need to be able to accomplish those tasks. And it's been really incredible. We meet monthly. Maybe one day will be more often than that. But for
Sure.
now, being able to provide a class that is completely free to participants is really an amazing thing, because there are millions of people who live in Los Angeles County. And so statistically speaking, many thousands of them have
Sure.
disabilities.
When you
So
see those athletes come in and they're experiencing functional fitness or CrossFit, we're using those two terms interchangeably. Do
yeah,
you see fear at first when they come in, or trepidation, or do you find that most of the time they come in and they are willing to try anything?
you definitely see the whole spectrum. Like we have several women in the group who are all survivors of osteosarcoma, which is a bone cancer. And they are in a support group together through their cancer experience. And one of them found the class, and then
Uh-huh.
suddenly the next month she brought two more. And one of them was like, yeah, let's go. And the other one was like, I don't know about this,
Sure.
I don't know. And it's really about everything from just the basic encouragement
Sure.
and, teaching someone that they are capable, making sure that they believe it too, to making sure that you have the right adaptations for what you're asking them to do based on what their impairment is. There's a lot that goes into programming for a group class of adaptive athletes, because I never know exactly who will be there each month. And
Sure.
so I have to have many versions of the same workout
Right.
prepared in order to accommodate each type of impairment that may be present that day. So everything from, quadriplegia, who, people who have, are wheelchair users but don't necessarily have grip or hand function,
Yeah.
to people who use a prosthetic leg, someone who doesn't yet have a prosthetic leg, so they use crutches instead. So they don't necessarily have the ability to stand and hold something at the same time. There's a whole spectrum of types of disabilities that we need to be prepared for when we're writing and programming a workout for an unknown group.
Sure. And for the visual listeners, we're playing video so you could see some of the adaptive athletes I had the opportunity to drop in and kind of just watch. And I was in awe of the things that these folks are doing. It's so inspiring, and I never want to feel like I'm intruding, but I couldn't help but just like feel all the excitement and how proud everybody was to be able to do the things that they were doing. I mean, if you're just speaking about just the general public, so often people are just so nervous about doing something different. And so to see that group of folks like pushing sleds and pulling sleds, whether they are on one leg or they're on crutches or they're in a wheelchair, it's amazing. And so I also feel like you are the perfect personality to welcome them in because, like I said earlier, you have this way of just making people feel welcome and like they're part of the community. And, it makes people feel like they're at home, which is so important in any environment, but especially when you walk into a gym that can be so scary.
It can be very scary, absolutely. And, I have even, seen people who are so incredibly confident when doing the sport that they focus in and have been doing for many years,
Yes.
then come into the gym environment and still be intimidated, still be,
Yes.
very, it's trepidatious coming into this new environment, even though they're already athletic. They know that
Yeah.
they're athletic, they know they're capable of a lot, but suddenly you're asking them to use implements they've never used before and things they're like never could have imagined themselves doing. And suddenly they're like, I don't know if I can do that. And it's really all about setting them up for success and understanding how to scale,
Yep.
but also how to adapt movements to really understand like how to set them up for success long term. We never want someone to fail at something on their first try because the likelihood of them trying it again is so significantly diminished that, especially when it comes to athletes with disabilities, making sure that there's a version of that movement that we know they can accomplish,
Sure.
and then increasing its difficulty over time. There's a difference between adapting a movement and scaling a movement.
Sure.
So when we look at the adaptations for movements, it is going to be something that we are able to change in order for a person with a particular impairment to gain the ability to do. That is adapting. If we scale a movement, so let's look at a random movement.
Okay.
Handstand walks. Someone with a lower extremity impairment has the ability to learn how to handstand walk.
Sure.
But someone in a wheelchair will never handstand walk. So we replace that movement with a different high skill movement that the seated athlete has the ability to attain.
Okay.
Whether that is now or in the future by gaining skill, confidence, consistency. So if we're looking at a handstand walk for a lower limb impaired athlete, the equivalency could be something like a wheelie. So an athlete in a seated position will pop up into a wheelie, getting their front wheels, their casters off the ground,
Yeah.
and they have to roll across space, balancing on just two wheels.
That's
That is not
amazing.
something that you or I could sit in a wheelchair and just do.
No
That's a
way.
skilled movement. That is a
Yes.
high skill movement replacing a high skill movement that would be impossible with a high skill movement that is absolutely attainable.
Right.
Now, if we're looking at how do we scale that movement, that is the difficulty of the movement itself. So the goal is to get a new seated athlete to one day be able to do a wheelie through space.
Sure.
Where do we start? We start with wheelie positions in holds. So kicking up into a wheelie, you pop up into a wheelie and you're trying to stay still. That is significantly easier than moving through space while in a wheelie. So if they can't pop into a wheelie consistently and then be able to control that position, they will not be able to do a wheelie. So by popping up, practicing kicking up into that handstand, you can't just handstand walk if you don't know how to kick up.
Right.
So it's the same
Yeah.
thing here. We have the adapted version of the movement, but then we also have the ability to scale the skill level of that movement
I
so
love
that we're
this.
able to then teach someone how to gain higher skill or be able to reach higher intensities like changing the weights that
Right.
they're using or something like that. So there's really so much that goes into coaching these different athletes because what we see as a normal RX workout in our gym setting,
Sure.
That RX may literally be impossible for
Sure.
someone with a certain type of impairment to ever be able to do.
So it takes
How,
somebody who you really
yeah,
have to have somebody leading this that has experience. You not I could never, at least not at this point. It would take a very long time for me to be able to even understand the different adaptions.
yeah. So, at the end of the day, experience is the best teacher. What I could do a few years ago in planning workouts and writing workouts and adapting workouts that were originally written for able-bodied athletes, what I could do 3 years ago is not the same as what I'm capable of now.
Sure.
And, it is a skill. It takes experience and knowledge. And there's, a lot of ways to gain that experience. There's, several certification programs that are out there. I'm actually wearing my Adaptive Training Academy shirt right now. There it is. The Adaptive Training Academy is a organization that literally runs adaptive training and coaching courses. So if you want to learn how to understand the disability experience within the CrossFit specific setting, and then understand how to look at workouts, how to adapt them, how to write workouts from scratch, what needs are different for one athlete than the other, and understanding, kind of the spectrum of disability, their course covers all of that.
I put those
And,
in the show notes for everybody.
perfect. We'll get them the link, and
Yes.
I cannot recommend it enough. It was the first CrossFit specific course I ever took. So it does count for CEUs, and it is a CrossFit recognized course.
Wonderful.
For those who are interested in their like L4 and L3, but it is a really amazing organization that has built over the last several years, literally a course that has now certified thousands of coaches worldwide who are now so much more prepared to bring in that adaptive athlete who rolls into their gym for the first time. And it is really a constant learning experience. I took the course, but who I was as a coach that first month after passing the course is not the same coach I am now. And so much experience, so much of experience is a teacher as well. There's courses out there that give you that baseline understanding and knowledge to then break into learning and doing.
And why don't you give us the information on how to get in contact with Angel City Sports, maybe their Instagram or website?
Yeah, sure. Angel City Sports is very active on Instagram. Their account is constantly putting up information about their events. The Angel City Sports website has the full active calendar of events. All Angel City Sports events are free for athletes with disabilities, with the exception of a couple. But all of that information is there on the website. All you have to do is scroll down on the home page and you'll be able to see the calendar of events that are happening that month and into the next month. And that's where people can sign up for those events as well, register for whichever ones they're interested in.
And then what does the future hold for Anna Stern?
That's a great question. I don't know how long I'll compete for, but for now, at least through September of this year. But definitely more of the same. I plan on just expanding the amount of people in the disability community locally who I can possibly expose to CrossFit. I will. I want to continue to meet new athletes and maybe people who don't consider themselves athletes right now, but give them the opportunity to, try functional fitness and have access to it, and then be able to kind of move forward in their lives and set goals for themselves that surround fitness in a way that maybe they didn't have before. I think really long term, that's my goal, is to just give access to fitness to as many people as I possibly can, because the disability community is not going anywhere. It is the only minority group in the world that you or anyone else could become a part of in the blink of an eye.
That's
And
something that I even think about.
like literally tomorrow your life could
Yes.
change. And that's what happens for so many people within the community. And suddenly the life that you've known just doesn't exist anymore. And how can you move forward? How can you continue to have outlets for your own expression and your own ability to stay independent and strong and proud and brave? And how can you really move forward, set new goals, find new passions? And it's really something that I just think people don't know exists. And so to expand our programs and expand our reach, through LA County and, wherever I end up in life is really kind of just my goal long term is really just giving this access to as many people as I can.
You're inspiring me so much right now. Okay, we have a final question. If you could go
Sure.
back into time and tell a 10-year-old Anna something, what would you tell her?
That's a great question, because this life that I have is just so far removed from anything 10-year-old Anna could have possibly imagined, that I think I would just tell her that whatever it is going to end up, it's going to end up great. You make your way wherever you're at, and whether you expected to be there or not isn't important. Just because your path changes doesn't mean you've failed at something else. It is all about kind of just going with the flow and finding what brings you joy. There's just nothing else in the world that would wake me up at 4:45 a.m. multiple days a week other than coaching fitness. It's just true. There's nothing else. So I think I would just tell 10-year-old Anna to just trust that you'll find your way and that you're going to end up doing something that you love.
Anna, oh, I'm so glad you came to talk to me today.
Me too. This was so much fun.
Thank you so much. Where could people find you?
I am on Instagram at astern12. It's a public account, so you can just follow. But mostly all I post is about fitness and maybe sometimes the food that I eat, and that's kind of about it. Oh, and pictures of my cat. But besides that, that's really all that's there. I am at Strange Strength and Conditioning at least 5 days a week, so you can find me there too. I coach able-bodied athletes as much as I coach disabled athletes. And so if anyone's interested in learning more about the programs that we run, I just could talk about it all day. So I just want to spread the word as much as I can and grow the program and, grow participation in fitness for all of the people with disabilities in our community.
I'm going to
Instagram is really it.
I will link your Instagram. I'll link Strange. I'll link Angel City Sports. Everything that we talked about today, there'll be a link in the show notes. And I want you to know I am so honored that you came on today. And I just think the world of you.
Oh, thank you so much, JR. This was super fun. I've never done anything like this before, so
you're amazing.
I was just
you did so good.
I was just glad that it's something I could talk about forever, because I could talk someone's ear off about adaptive sports.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And if everybody out there likes our show, please make sure that you are following the program. Please make sure that you rate and subscribe and share this podcast with your friends. And until next time, have a great day. Bye. Anna, that was awesome. Thank you so much.
Yay, I did it.
You did it.